In my last life, I died in my rented room. I died of a sudden acute heart failure, with no one by my side. For money, I spent 3 years as a stand-in father for Sophia Taylor's daughter, who has autism. Because I looked like her deceased, beloved husband. I gave everything I had, loved that child as if she were my own, and finally she called me dad once. I thought that with that merit and all my hard work, Sophia Taylor would accept me. But after the child recovered, she handed me a check for $10 million and told me to get out. She said, "Ethan Johnson, never forget your identity. You're just a fake." Reborn, I returned to the day the contract was signed. Looking at the clause that the party B must not develop any private feelings toward party A or her daughter, I laughed. This time, I only wanted to be an emotionless childcare machine, take the money and leave. I was back 3 years earlier, sitting across from Sophia Taylor. Her stunning face wore a trace of impatience. "Have you finished reading the contract? If there are no issues, sign." On the table sat the humiliating fake father contract I'd signed in my last life. One clause was blindingly obvious. During the term of the contract, Party B shall not develop any private feelings for Party A Sophia Taylor or her daughter Luna Taylor. In my last life, I treated it as a joke. This life, I took it as gospel. "Ms. Taylor, I have no objections to the contract's content, but I need to add one clause." I spoke calmly and pushed the contract back. Sophia Taylor and her elite female lawyer Clara Lewis were stunned. They clearly hadn't expected me to make demands. Sophia Taylor frowned slightly, motioning for me to continue. Ignoring her scrutinizing gaze, I picked up the pen on the table and unhurriedly wrote, "Supplementary clause. Working hours shall be 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., 5-day work week, with strict observance of national statutory holidays. Any requests exceeding working hours shall be compensated at 3 times the hourly wage as overtime pay." After writing the clause, I paused, then added, "Additionally, I am only responsible for Ms. Luna Taylor's daily care and psychological counseling. I will not participate in Party A's family affairs, nor provide any form of emotional consolation or extra services." The air went silent. Clara Lewis's expression looked as if she'd seen a ghost. And on Sophia Taylor's perpetually icy face, a crack appeared. She probably thought it preposterous that a man who'd do anything for money would bring up labor law and boundaries. In my last life, to please her, I was on call 24 hours a day, always available, living like a high-end nanny. In the end, I was labeled a fake. Given a second chance, I didn't want to love anymore. I just wanted to make money and live well. "Mr. Johnson." Clara Lewis cleared her throat, trying to salvage the situation. "You may have misunderstood. MS. Taylor means that you need to devote yourself wholeheartedly to the young lady's recovery. I understand." I interrupted her and looked at Sophia Taylor with firm tone. "Precisely because wholehearted devotion is required, clear rest times are necessary to ensure my working condition and professionalism. Ms. Taylor, you're hiring me to heal your daughter, not to hire a cheap, multi-purpose maid, right?" I looked her straight in the eyes. The admiration and timidity from my previous life were gone, leaving only a businesslike calm. Sophia Taylor stared at me for a full half-minute, her gaze deep. Just when I thought she would slam the contract in my face, she suddenly let out a soft laugh. Then she picked up the pen and signed her name on the contract. "All right, we'll do it your way. I hope your professional ability can live up to the demands you've set." I breathed a sigh of relief. I knew she would, because in my last life, I had already succeeded once. This time, I would only do better. A child-rearing machine without feelings is always more efficient than a fool in love. The contract was in duplicate. After signing, Sophia Taylor's lawyer Clara Lewis handed me my copy on the spot. I carefully put it away and slipped it into my bag, moving with composed ease, as if I'd signed an ordinary employment contract rather than a pact of servitude. "Mr. Johnson, my daughter Luna Taylor's situation is rather special. She has severe autistic tendencies, doesn't communicate with others, and her emotions are unstable. I don't want any accidents to happen." Sophia Taylor's voice pulled my thoughts back. There was a hint of warning in her tone. I stood up and smiled formally. "Ms. Taylor, rest assured, I am professional. May I see the child now? I need to understand her condition as soon as possible and draft a preliminary intervention plan." She hadn't expected me to be so decisive and was momentarily taken aback, then nodded and led the way upstairs. Luna Taylor's room was at the end of the second-floor corridor, decorated like a fairy tale castle, but the room felt lifeless. The 4-year-old girl sat alone on the carpet, repeatedly twisting and restoring a Rubik's Cube in her hands, showing no reaction to our arrival. Her profile bore about a 70% resemblance to her father, Ryan Taylor, which was also why I had been chosen. In my last life, the moment I saw this child, my fatherly love overflowed, and I was unbearably moved. I rushed over to hug her, but was forcefully pushed away and had my arm scratched. This time, I stood at the doorway and watched her from afar without approaching. She doesn't speak or look at people, the doctors say. Sophia Taylor's voice was a little hoarse. I know, I interrupted calmly. Ms. Taylor, from now until 6 in the evening is my working time. To ensure the effectiveness of the intervention, please do not enter this room arbitrarily, and have the nanny, Martha White, refrain from disturbing us. Sophia Taylor's complex gaze rested on my face for a moment. Then she nodded and turned, closing the door behind her. The room was left with only me and Luna Taylor. I didn't, as I had in my past life, impatiently try to talk to her or use toys to attract her. I simply moved a small stool to sit 3 meters away from her and took out a Rubik's Cube, imitating her, twisting it over and over. No talking, no approaching, no forcing. I made myself into a presence that would not pose any threat to her. This is the most basic environmental adaptation therapy in behavioral psychology. First, let her get used to my presence and eliminate her guard. In my last life, I was blinded by love and used the clumsiest and most wrong methods, taking many detours. 1 hour, 2 hours. Luna Taylor remained immersed in her own world, and I patiently repeated the motions in my hands. Until noon, when the nanny Martha White gently reminded from outside the door that it was time for lunch. I stood up, walked to Luna Taylor, and gently set a tray with cartoon rice balls and a vegetable salad in front of her. Then I returned to my spot, took out another identical lunch, and ate it in small bites. Throughout the process, I remained silent. She didn't touch that lunch. I didn't urge her. After finishing mine, I cleared the tray away. In the afternoon, I tried a different approach. I took out a tablet, played a slow-paced marine documentary at low volume, then resumed sitting in the corner reading my professional books. The day passed quietly like that. At 6 sharp, I got up on time, packed my things, and, facing Luna Taylor's back, said formulaically, "Luna, see you tomorrow." After saying it, I opened the door and walked out, without a trace of reluctance. Sophia Taylor was standing outside, apparently waiting for a while. She frowned when she saw me come out and asked, "You sat there all day, just like that?" She probably expected me to, like her late husband Ryan Taylor, embrace and win over that child with endless gentleness and patience. Ms. Taylor, trust takes time to build, especially for children with psychological trauma, I explained calmly. Forcing our way into her world will only make her raise higher walls. Today was only the first step. Then when will you get her to speak? She seemed displeased with this laissez-faire efficiency. I can't give a precise timetable. I looked at her, neither humbled nor arrogant. But I can assure you, every step I take is guided by professional theory. If you don't trust me, you can terminate the contract at any time. After saying that, I nodded to her, walked around her, and went straight downstairs. "Ethan Johnson," she suddenly called after me from behind. I stopped, not turning around. "Stay for dinner." There was a faint, barely perceptible probing tone in her voice. I glanced at my wristwatch, 6:05. "Sorry, Ms. Taylor." I turned to face her with a professional smile. "It's already past working hours. And the contract clearly states that my job does not include dining with you." With that, I ignored the instant clouding of her expression and walked out of the villa that had suppressed all the joys and sorrows of my past life. The moment I stepped out the gate, I breathed a long sigh. This time, I was no longer that man who fantasized about leeching off a woman to climb up. I was simply Ethan Johnson, a professional worker who gets paid to do a job. I thought that as long as I strictly observed working hours, I could draw a clear line between myself and Sophia Taylor in this household. But it turned out trouble has a way of finding you. On my 3rd day on the job, the arrival of an unexpected guest shattered the villa's calm. That afternoon, I was with Luna Taylor in her room, working on a complex starry sky jigsaw puzzle. She still didn't speak, but she wasn't completely ignoring me like on the first day. occasionally glancing my way from the corner of her eye. It was a good start. Just then, the door was suddenly shoved open from the outside with a loud bang. Luna Taylor was startled, the puzzle pieces scattering across the floor. She immediately shrank into the corner, hands over her head, her body beginning to tremble slightly. My heart sank. I stood up at once and positioned myself in front of her, looking toward the door. An elderly man stood there in a bespoke suit, his hair combed meticulously, his gaze severe. Behind him was the butler Thomas Green, looking troubled. It was Sophia Taylor's father, Patrick Taylor. In my previous life, he never showed me a single friendly face. He called me a penniless opportunist trying to latch on to wealth, a disgusting substitute. And when I was caring for the sick Luna Taylor and grew closer to Sophia Taylor, he warned me that if I dared to harbor improper thoughts, he would make me disappear from this city for good. You're the man. Patrick Taylor's eyes roved over me. You do look a bit like him. No wonder my daughter fell under some spell. I said nothing, just looked at him coldly. Let me tell you, don't think you can ride on a similar face to change your fate. His voice was authoritative. Our Taylor family will never acknowledge a shameless man like you. You're nothing but a tool my daughter bought with money. Once my granddaughter recovers, you'll get out of my sight. His words were almost identical to what he'd said last time. Back then, I went pale, trembling, clenching my fists, and unable to form a single coherent rebuttal. But now, calmly, I took from my briefcase the contract with the additional clauses. Mr. Taylor, hello. I flipped the contract to the page with the supplemental terms and showed it to him. According to the contract I signed with Ms. Sophia Taylor, my scope of work is limited to psychological counseling and daily care for Ms. Luna Taylor. I'm not to be involved in any of Party A's family affairs. Patrick Taylor hadn't expected that reaction. He was stunned. All the insults he had already stuck in his throat. I continued. Your behavior today has seriously interfered with my work and frightened my client, Ms. Luna Taylor, which may set back her recovery. What kind of attitude is this? Patrick Taylor's face flushed and paled. You, a servant, dare speak to me like this? I'm not a servant. I am a domestic consultant hired by Ms. Taylor. I corrected him, then glanced at my watch. Also, from the time you entered until now, 5 minutes and 30 seconds have passed. During that time, you occupied my work hours. The consultation content concerned your personal prejudice against me and the Taylor family's household ethics. I smiled in a business-like manner. According to the hourly rates in the contract appendix, I will later send a bill for 5 minutes and 30 seconds of family conflict consultation to Ms. Taylor's email. Please remind her to pay on time. You're insane. You dare charge me? Patrick Taylor's fingers trembled with anger. This is my legal right. I put the contract away, my tone still even. If you have nothing else, please leave and do not disturb my work. Otherwise, I will bill you by the minute and continue to provide you with consulting services. Patrick Taylor probably has never met such an arrogant worker in his life. He was silenced by my words, his well-maintained face flushing a liver-like color. Just then, Sophia Taylor's tall figure appeared in the doorway. She had obviously come because she heard the commotion and looked at our confrontation with a complicated expression. Dad, why are you here? She stepped in and broke the deadlock. Sophia, look at the good thing you found. Patrick Taylor seemed to have found support and immediately complained. He actually dared to talk back to me. He even said he'd charge me for consultation. It's outrageous. I thought Sophia Taylor would, like the previous life, make me apologize without hearing the facts. But she just silently glanced at Luna Taylor, who was cowering in the corner and clearly not herself. Then she looked at me, calm and unruffled. A flicker of an emotion I couldn't read passed through her eyes. Ridicule, curiosity, even a restrained amusement. Dad, she finally spoke. Mr. Johnson is a professional. Your behavior will affect Luna's treatment. I'll take you home. She didn't blame me. Patrick Taylor stared at his daughter in disbelief. But seeing Sophia Taylor's look, he huffed unwillingly and turned to leave. A war that in my last life humiliated me beyond measure was, in this life, defused with a contract casually. I even had overtime pay to collect. I didn't look at Sophia Taylor. I turned back to Luna Taylor and quietly soothed her frightened mood. Behind me, Sophia Taylor's gaze lingered on my back for a long time. I could feel that from that moment on, In her eyes, I was no longer merely a stand-in for a deceased husband. I had become an intriguing worker she couldn't figure out or control. Sophia Taylor's appearances on the second floor noticeably increased. She no longer just paused briefly at the door. She found various excuses to come in. Sometimes it was to bring a plate of fruit, sometimes to ask about Luna Taylor's condition. But her deep gaze always, intentionally or not, fell on me. I ignored it and continued to strictly follow my worker's rules. When she came, I stood to report the work, organized and professional, like giving a project presentation. When she left, I continued my tasks, not wasting a word or giving an extra glance. My coldness and distance, like an invisible wall, kept all her probes out. And Luna Taylor, under my procedural companionship, improved day by day. She no longer resisted my closeness and would even tug at my sleeve to make me play with her. She remained silent, but there was light beginning to appear in her eyes. In the blink of an eye, a month passed. That afternoon the sun was just right. I was teaching Luna Taylor to make little animals out of colored clay. My hands were deft, and a lively little rabbit quickly took shape in my palm. Luna Taylor watched without blinking. She reached out her small hand and carefully touched the rabbit's long ear, then looked up at me. It was the first time I saw such a clear emotion in her eyes, longing and affection. I handed the little rabbit to her and encouraged, "You can try to." She took the little rabbit, cradling it like a treasure in her palm. Then, imitating me, she picked up a piece of white clay and began to clumsily shape it. Just then, the study door opened and Sophia Taylor came out. She probably wanted to check on her daughter and stepped lightly. Luna Taylor fussed with the clay for a long time, but it still wouldn't take shape. She grew anxious, her little face flushed, and she looked to me for help. I took her small hand and guided her. "Don't worry, look. Here you roll into a ball. Here you pinch a bit." Perhaps my voice soothed her. Her tension slowly eased. She looked at me. Her mouth opened slightly, and a vague syllable slipped out from her throat. My movements froze instantly. At the door, Sophia Taylor also stood as if struck by lightning, rooted to the spot. Luna Taylor seemed unaware of the earth-shattering thing she'd just done. Seeing I didn't react, she tugged my sleeve again, a little urgently, and called once more, "Ethan!" Not the daddy that in the last life plunged me into ruin, but Ethan, my name. At that moment something struck my heart hard. I looked into Luna Taylor's clear eyes. Reflected, there was the whole image of me, Ethan Johnson, not the shadow of another man. The overwhelming impact left me speechless for a time. Sophia Taylor hurried over. She crouched down, looked at her daughter, her eyes reddening, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. "Luna, what did you just say?" "Say it again." But Luna shut her mouth like she'd been startled and retreated back into her shell. No matter how Sophia Taylor pressed, she wouldn't speak again. Sophia Taylor's gaze finally fell upon me. That look was indescribably complex. Shock, ecstatic joy, and something burning I had never seen before in her eyes. All day Sophia Taylor seemed unsettled. At 6 p.m, I packed up on time, ready to leave. "Ethan Johnson," she called after me, her voice a little hoarse. "Tonight don't go. Stay and have dinner with us." Considerate, celebrating Luna's speaking. Her tone carried a hint of insistence that couldn't be refused, yet in her eyes there was a glimmer of hope. If this had been my previous life, I'd have been flattered and disoriented. But I calmly raised my wrist and checked my watch. Then, in front of her, I took out my phone, opened the timer app, and hit start. The clear beep sounded in the quiet living room. I looked up to meet her stunned gaze, wearing the standard, detached professional smile. "All right, Miss Taylor. It's 6:01 p.m. Overtime begins now. Per the contract, triple pay. Are you sure you want me to stay?" All the ambiguous, tender, probing expressions on her face froze. She stared at the numbers ticking on my phone screen. For the first time, a look approaching frustration and loss of control crossed her beautiful face. She probably never imagined that one day someone would shatter the atmosphere she'd so carefully crafted in this way. I could feel something churning violently in those deep eyes of hers. She realized that the man in front of her was like a handful of sand you couldn't grasp. The harder she tried, the faster he slipped away. What she wanted, it seemed, was no longer just a tool to cure her daughter. That night's overtime dinner ended in discord. When I accurately reported, overtime duration, 23 minutes and 7 seconds. Equivalent hourly pay, $2,520. Sophia Taylor's expression could no longer be described as merely displeased. She said nothing, only silently had the butler Thomas Green transfer the overtime pay along with that month's salary to me. After that, Sophia Taylor's attitude toward me became increasingly strange. She no longer tried to probe me with suggestive words or a sentimental atmosphere, but switched to a more direct, clumsy approach. For example, she would suddenly buy me an expensive name-brand watch, saying, "So you can record work time more conveniently and improve efficiency." I checked the price in front of her and then transferred the equivalent amount back to her with a note. "Thank you for your concern, Miss Taylor. The timer function is built into phones. I shouldn't take company property." Another example, she would have the kitchen prepare dishes she knew I liked, then stop me as I was leaving, saying, "There's too much. Throwing it out would be wasteful. Take it home." I would smile and reply, "Thanks, Miss Taylor, but I live alone and can't eat that much." I suggest the company improve procurement processes and establish accurate meal counts to avoid waste. After a few such incidents, she visibly grew haggard. Dark circles under her eyes deepened, and she would occasionally lose focus in meetings. Several times I saw her standing alone by the study window, brows knotted, lost in thought. I had a vague sense that something was wrong with her, but I didn't bother to investigate. Whatever she became was none of my business. I just had to do my job, wait out the contract, take the money, and leave. That day I was helping Luna Taylor with rehabilitation exercises when Sophia Taylor's assistant, Daniel Brown, hurried over. "Mr. Johnson, Ms. Taylor." Daniel's face was anxious. "She's had a headache since this morning and just fainted in the study. My heart skipped. In the previous life, she seemed not to have this problem. Did you call an ambulance?" I asked calmly. "Yes, it's on the way. But she seems really uncomfortable and keeps saying she's cold. Could you go see her?" Daniel wiped his sweat. I frowned, handed Luna to the nanny Martha White, and hurried toward the study. In the study, Sophia Taylor lay on the sofa, eyes tightly shut, face pale, her forehead beaded with cold sweat. She seemed trapped in some nightmare, murmuring words unconsciously. I stepped closer and finally heard her broken mutterings. "Don't go. Ethan Johnson, I'm sorry. It's raining, the umbrella, cold, don't die." It felt as if the blood in my body froze at that moment. What she was saying sounded like the day in my last life when she had driven me away. It had been a late autumn rainy night. She threw a check in my face and told me to get out. I had no umbrella, dragging a suitcase alone through the cold rain for a very long time. And the final scene of me dying in my rented room, unable to pay the heating bill, freezing to death from heart failure that bitter winter. How could she possibly know about those scenes? "Mr. Johnson," Daniel Brown's voice pulled me back. I snapped out of my reverie, forcibly suppressing the tumult in my chest, and hurried to the sofa. Her forehead was chilling to the touch. "Keep her physically warm," I ordered. "Bring a blanket and a hot water bottle." Under my direction, everyone began to move in a calm, orderly manner. The ambulance arrived quickly. After checking her, the doctor said it was acute stress reaction caused by overwork and excessive psychological pressure. Sophia Taylor was taken to the hospital. The villa fell silent again, but I couldn't calm down. How could she have dreamed about things from a past life? Could it be she'd been reborn too? The thought flashed through my mind, and I immediately dismissed it. No, if she had been reborn as well, she wouldn't have treated me that way from the start. She would have known long ago that a hard line wouldn't work on me. Then how to explain those dreams? All day, I was restless. Even when I was with Luna Taylor, I found myself distracted. At 6 in the evening, I left work on time. As I walked out the villa gate, I turned back on an inexplicable impulse. In my last life, I had longed so desperately to have a place of my own here. In this life, I only wanted to get away. Whether those were dreams or something else, I refused to be dragged back into that hell. I took out my phone, opened my notes, and typed one line. 2 years and 11 months until the contract ends. Stay rational. Don't create unnecessary trouble. I closed the phone and merged into the city traffic without looking back. Time is the best medicine and the quickest catalyst. In the blink of an eye, the 3-year contract reached its final day. During these 3 years, Sophia Taylor's nightmares seemed never to stop. Her personality changed drastically. from initially cold and domineering to increasingly silent. The looks she gave me always carried pain and struggle I couldn't decipher. She still tried to be kind to me in clumsy ways, but I met it all with professional distance. As for Luna Taylor, she had transformed from a little hedgehog living in her own world into a 7-year-old who could laugh and play and tug at my sleeve to cuddle. She could now attend an ordinary primary school. Aside from being a bit more introverted than her peers, she was no different from a normal child. She still called me Ethan out of habit, affectionately and naturally. Sophia Taylor never corrected her, though each time she heard her eyes dimmed for a moment. Today was the last day of the contract. My resignation paperwork had long since been completed. I placed a 100-page thick Luna Taylor growth and subsequent care handover manual on Sophia Taylor's desk. It detailed every aspect of Luna's past 3 years: her dietary preferences, daily routines, emotional triggers, and response plans for various situations, down to specifics like her fear of thunder and needing a night light to sleep. This was my final and most important deliverable as a childcare consultant. Ms. Taylor, the manual is all here. If you have any questions later, you can contact my lawyer James Wilson at any time. Sophia Taylor didn't look at the manual. Her gaze was locked onto my face, bloodshot veins visible at the corners of her eyes. Do you really have to go? Her voice was hoarse and rough. The contract has expired. I answered succinctly. I can give you double, no, 10 times the salary. Just stay. She was almost pleading. I shook my head, took my copy of the contract from my bag, and placed it beside the handbook. Ms. Taylor, we have an employer-employee relationship. Now, the contract is terminated. She suddenly pulled another document from the drawer, shoved it in front of me, breathing hard. Then we'll change the relationship. Ethan Johnson, look at this. I glanced down. At the top of the document were 5 gilded characters. Prenuptial agreement. The terms inside were astonishingly generous. She had almost assigned all her personal assets to me, with only one request. Marry me, and forever be Luna Taylor's father. Looking at the agreement, I suddenly found it ridiculous. After going in circles, she still believed that everything, feelings and people's hearts included, could be bought with money. In my previous life, I had dreamed of this agreement, of becoming the man of this house. But now, it was worth less than scrap paper to me. I didn't even turn to the second page. In front of her, I tore that priceless agreement in half. Then into quarters, eighths, the paper shreds fluttered down like snow from my fingertips, scattering on the expensive carpet. Sophia Taylor's pupils shrank to pinpricks in that instant. All the color drained from her face, her lips trembled, but she couldn't utter a single word. Ms. Taylor. I lifted my head to meet her eyes full of pain and disbelief, and spoke each word deliberately. The contract is over. I'm off the clock. With that, I felt no regret and turned to leave. Behind me came Luna Taylor's tearful cry. Ethan, don't go. Don't you want me? My steps faltered. My heart ached fiercely. But I didn't look back. I was afraid that if I did, I'd soften and repeat the mistakes of my last life. Ethan Johnson, remember, you are independent. You are free. You belong to no one and no longer need to rely on anyone. I straightened my spine and walked out of the villa gate resolutely, step by step. This time, it was truly over. The moment I left the Taylor villa, I didn't look back. I took a taxi straight to the airport. I didn't go home, not even to the small rented apartment, because I knew if Sophia Taylor were to look for me, that would be the first place she would think of. My plan had begun the day I decided to sign that supplemental clause. For 3 years, aside from work, I spent the rest of my time preparing to leave. Under an alias, I studied finance online, quietly obtained a barista certificate, and in a seaside town where no one knew me, Westonport, I found a shop that was up for transfer. All my savings, including every wage and overtime pay Sophia Taylor had given me, I diversified and invested prudently, growing steadily. After receiving the final payment in the tens of millions, the first thing I did was cancel my old phone number and bank card, cutting off all ties with the past. The plane landed. The sea breeze carried a salty dampness, and I exhaled deeply. Using my new identity, I took over that long-watched little shop and prepared to open a cafe of my own. Sometimes, late at night, I still think of Luna Taylor. I remember the first time she smiled at me, the first time she called my name, her soft crown of hair, and the trusting look in her eyes. My heart still ached like a piece had been ripped out. But I knew clearly I couldn't turn back. Going back would mean facing Sophia Taylor again, facing Patrick Taylor, facing that bottomless whirlpool. I had barely climbed out. I couldn't fall back in. The guilt I felt toward Luna Taylor would have to be the price I paid for my own rebirth. On the cafe's opening day, I received the only contact from the past. It was from the lawyer I had hired, James Wilson. He reached me through the emergency encrypted email I'd left behind. Mr. Johnson, sorry to disturb you as you start your new life. James Wilson's tone was professional but carried a hint of weariness. But Miss Sophia Taylor is tearing my firm apart. She's using every connection she has. She's gone mad looking for you. My heart tightened. My fingertips holding the phone went slightly white. Mr. Johnson, I followed your instructions and didn't disclose any of your information. James continued. It's just, the situation over on Ms. Taylor's side might be worse than you imagine. What do you mean? There was a few seconds silence on the other end before James spoke again, heavily. I heard, Ms. Luna Taylor, after you left, had a relapse of her autism. She shut herself in her room, not eating or drinking, seeing no one. It's more serious than 3 years ago. Ms. Taylor, she's on the verge of collapse. With a boom in my head, my mind went blank. No matter how many times I had told myself not to soften, not to look back, at the moment I heard about Luna, my defenses crumbled instantly. That child, the one I had struggled to pull out of the darkness, had gone back in. Was I too cruel? No. I wiped away the tears about to spill. In my last life, I had paid with my life for that child and that family. In this life, I simply took back what I deserved and left. I was not wrong. The fault lay with Sophia Taylor. It was she who, from the start, treated me as a disposable tool. She had created this situation with her own hands. Mr. Johnson, are you still there? I am. I took a deep breath, letting my voice steady, even taking on a trace of coldness. Mr. Wilson, thank you for telling me, but this is no longer my concern. I understand. Also, I paused, speaking each word deliberately. This is the last time we contact each other. From now on, do not mention anything about the Taylor family to me. My past is dead. After hanging up, I deleted James Wilson's contact completely. Outside, the sun shone and the sea breeze was warm. My cafe was filled with the rich aroma of coffee. My world had begun to collapse the moment Ethan Johnson left. First it was Luna. She locked herself in her room, the same as 3 years ago, silent, refusing food and drink. I brought in the best psychiatrists in the world, but they were helpless at that closed door. I knew that what could heal her was never any doctor. Only Ethan Johnson. I searched for him as if driven mad. I checked all his records and discovered that the ID was fake, the name was fake, everything was fake. He was like a ghost who appeared out of nowhere and vanished the same way, passing through my life. Apart from taking my daughter's soul, he left nothing behind. What followed were the nightmares that had haunted me for 3 years. They grew clearer and more coherent, like a black and white film looping in my mind. And the protagonist was Ethan Johnson. That Ethan Johnson in this life, calm, distant, prickly, was in my dreams, loving me with a humble, fierce devotion. I dreamed he clumsily learned to cook for me, burning his hands until they blistered. I dreamed he held sick Luna, keeping watch for days and nights without sleep. I dreamed that when he looked at me, his eyes shone with a starlight I had never cherished. Then the scene changed. I dreamed I coldly flicked a check in his face. You're just a fake. Now it's time for you to exit, I said, high and mighty, cruel. I dreamed he wandered in the rain, distraught, his thin silhouette stretched long by the streetlights. He didn't cry. He only hugged himself and walked step by step into boundless darkness. The final scene was a shabby rented room. Winter, no heating. He wrapped himself in a thin blanket, curled on the bed, already cold. On his bedside was a clay rabbit. It was the first toy he had made for Luna. He'd always carried it with him. He died like that quietly. No one knew. When this vivid, complete dream, so real it felt like lived memory, finished playing in my head, I jolted awake from the office sofa. Outside, it was already daylight. I was drenched in cold sweat. My heart ached as if it might split. I finally understood. I finally understood why Ethan Johnson in this life had been so different from the start. Why he signed those icy clauses. Why he remained unmoved by all my affection. Why he left so decisively, without a trace of reluctance. It wasn't that he didn't love me. He was afraid to love again. He came back to life, carrying the heartbreak and despair I had crushed with my own hands in the last life. And I, the architect of all his pain, had forgotten everything. In this life, I had been so foolish as to try to control him and hurt him in the same way. A howl of pain burst from my throat. Like a madwoman, I swept every document, computer, and ornament from my desk to the floor. Shards flew. The clatter seemed to mock my stupidity and failure. I was wrong, ridiculously wrong. I thought I loved the shadow of Ryan Taylor. I thought I only sought him for Luna. But only now, when the image of his death in the last life merged with his resolute retreat in this one, did I awaken. What I loved was never Shadow. What I loved was the Ethan Johnson who awkwardly learned to cook for me. The Ethan Johnson who cradled Luna and soothed her tenderly. The Ethan Johnson who, though afraid, stood between me and my father. What I loved was Ethan Johnson, but I was the one who made him disappear. Once was enough, I did it again. I sank weakly into the wreckage on the floor and covered my face. A woman who was ruthless and decisive in business cried for the first time like a child abandoned by the whole world. When I finally found Ethan Johnson, it was already 6 months later. He had opened a small cafe in a warm, humid seaside town, Westonport. The name was simple, just Ethan's Corner. The moment I found him, I was in the middle of a long, anxious transnational video conference. When the private detective sent me that photo of him at the bar, smiling against the light, I suddenly stood up from my chair, left the stunned executives in the conference room, and ran straight out of the company. I booked the next flight as fast as I could. On the 10-odd hours of flying, I didn't close my eyes once. 2 scenes kept replaying in my head. One was the way he had tragically died in the previous life. The other was the peaceful smile in the photo. The 2 images intertwined, like countless needles piercing my heart. After getting off the plane, I didn't even have time to go to a hotel. I went straight to the cafe. Across the street, I saw him. He was wearing a simple white linen shirt, hair softly falling over his forehead. He was leaning over to brew a pour-over coffee, the afternoon sun pouring in through the window and lighting him up. In that moment, he was unlike any version I remembered. Not the humble stand-in, not the indifferent employee. He was just himself, Ethan Johnson. An Ethan Johnson I had never truly understood. My legs felt like they were filled with lead. I couldn't take a step. I was afraid my appearance would shatter that quiet, would make him run away again. I stood in a little shop across the street the whole afternoon, staring at him stupidly until he closed and went home. The next day, I changed into the plainest casual clothes and walked into the cafe. He was explaining coffee beans to a customer. When the bell over the door rang, he looked up and habitually smiled. Welcome. When his gaze fell on my face, the smile on his features froze instantly. Those once clear eyes registered shock first, then were replaced by thick suspicion and disgust. My heart felt as if it had been violently stabbed. What are you doing here? His voice was colder than winter seawater. I had a mouthful of things prepared to say, apologies, confessions, explanations. But under his stare, I couldn't utter a single word. In the end, I did the clumsiest thing and pointed at the little blackboard beside him. I came for coffee. He snorted a laugh full of mockery. He didn't refuse my business. He made my drink with practiced efficiency and told me the price. I paid, took the coffee, and left the cafe in humiliation. From that day on, I became his most regular customer. I went every day, come rain or shine. I didn't dare mention the past, didn't dare mention Luna, didn't dare speak more than necessary. I would quietly order a coffee, then leave. The branded sports car I gave him, the keys to the mansion, the company share documents, all were returned to me intact. Attached was a cold little note. Payment settled, do not disturb. I tried to help him move a heavy sack of coffee beans once. He immediately called over one of his part-time boys and, polite but distant, said to me, "Ma'am, thank you, we can handle it ourselves." I became a joke in his shop. The neighbors all knew me, the strange admirer who came every day for coffee but didn't dare say a word to the handsome owner. They could all see the love in my eyes. Only he pretended not to notice. He kept me out of his world with an invisible wall. No matter what I did, I couldn't get an inch closer to him. For the first time, I understood what helplessness feels like, what bitter regret is. The person I pushed away with my own hands, Now, no matter how hard I tried, wouldn't even glance back at me. Sophia Taylor's pursuit lasted a full year. Spring, summer, autumn, winter, 4 seasons cycled by. She became like a shadow, blending into the backdrop of my new life. At first, her presence annoyed and angered me. Gradually, I even grew numb. She came to the shop every day at the same time and ordered the plainest Americano. She said little, paid, and left. The coffees she bought piled up in that apartment across the street from the cafe. So many you could open a convenience store. She never mentioned Luna Taylor again, never spoke of the past. She stubbornly asserted her existence in this clumsy way. The neighbors moved from initial gossip to indifferent acceptance. A well-meaning aunt even advised me, "Ethan, I think that woman's sincere. Give her a chance." Sincere? I scoffed inwardly. Her sincerity was too cheap, and it came too late. I admit I'm no saint. Faced with her day-after-day persistence, when I saw her get a long cut on her arm from shielding me from falling billboard, when I heard she had moved Taylor Group's headquarters to this small town to stay here, my heart wavered, if only for a moment. Maybe she really had changed? Maybe I should. But reason always pulled me back from the edge at the last moment. The scar called the past ran deep in my bones. Touch it, and it bled. I couldn't gamble. I couldn't afford to. The tug-of-war ended one rainy night, identical to the night I left in my last life. Late autumn, a torrential downpour. The shop had few customers, and I was about to close early. As I was halfway down with the rolling shutter, a drenched figure stumbled onto the eaves. It was Sophia Taylor. She had no umbrella. Her expensive coat was darkened by rain and clung to her. Her hair was messy and dripping. She looked utterly wretched. Still, she clutched a bouquet to her chest. My hand froze on the shutter's pull ring. We stared at each other through the half-lowered door. She panted, rain tracing her cheeks, her eyes showing a vulnerability and plea I had never seen before. "Ethan," she finally said, her voice hoarse. "Can I come in and get out of the rain?" I was silent for a moment, then let go. She stepped into the shop and offered me the bouquet, as if she were giving me everything. "For you." I lowered my gaze. It was a carefully wrapped bouquet of fully bloomed white roses, the petals still beaded with rain, pure and immaculate. In that instant, every remaining, not yet sprung doubt in me turned to ash. White roses. They were the favorite flowers of her late husband, Ryan Taylor. I had forgotten to tell her they were also the flowers I hated most. Then I understood completely. No matter how much she repented each day, no matter what she did for me, in her subconscious eye, Ethan Johnson was still the shadow of Ryan Taylor, a repayment for past debts. The one she loved was the image of me she imagined into being, the worthy me she needed for her own redemption. She had never truly looked at me or tried to understand me. I did not take the bouquet. I looked up at her, my face bearing an unprecedented calm. "Miss Taylor," I said softly, "the language of white roses is pure love, beautiful, but it doesn't suit me." The hopeful expression on her face slowly froze. "This shop doesn't welcome you either." I walked to the door and pulled the rolling shutter back down, leaving only a one-person wide slit. "Take your past, your deep feelings, and your love for someone else, and leave my life." "Ethan, I'm not," she scrambled to explain. But I gave her no more opportunities. I completely lowered the rolling shutter. I turned off the lights in the shop and let the darkness envelop me. I could hear her outside, pounding on the doorboard again and again, stubbornly calling my name. But I paid her no more mind. This time, it was her turn to feel the despair of being abandoned by the whole world on a cold, rainy night. And I, Ethan Johnson, was free.